Hello and welcome to the third annual Sex Tech EU Conference 2021. We're very excited this year to be in partnership with Wolves Summit. And of course, none of this would be possible without our sponsors, Shh.com, Handy, and Besharam. Play more, shameless. I am Alexis Smiley Smith, and I will be the host this year. So pleased to be here. And so today, our panel, Sex Out of the Shadows, is being moderated by the highly esteemed Rachel Braun Scherl. And I'll introduce Rachel. She is the co-founder and managing partner and chief vagipreneur of Spark Solutions for Growth. So welcome, Rachel. Wonderful to have you. And I will turn the panel over to you.
Thank you so much, Alexis. It's great to be here. Like the folks I'm about to introduce, I spend my days and nights talking about femtech, sex tech, and trying to build businesses in the space. The name of our panel today is Sex Out of the Shadows. So in addition to acknowledging how sometimes challenging it is to run businesses in this space, we're bringing sex out of the shadows in 25 minutes, which is a pretty tall order. So I want to get right to it and introduce our panelists, founders and thought leaders who are helping to do just that, bring sex out of the shadows, make things more accessible in very many different ways. And let me introduce you first to Helmy, who is the events director at XBIZ, an adult industry business news and resource enterprise portal, and Raj Armani, who is the co-founder and COO of Besharam, India's #1 sexual wellness brand. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having us, Rachel.
So for us, this is a typical day. We spend all day talking about sexuality and wellness, and we might be outliers, not in this conference, but certainly on the planet. And I'm interested from each of your perspectives, what are some of the primary drivers of the societal and global discomfort around human sexuality in all its complex glory? So Raj, I'm going to start with you. Your business is focused on India as well as the Middle East, which are, I believe, thought of as more conservative, traditional cultures. So what was your experience of the role of sexuality and the societal discomfort when you were creating Besharam?
Well, I think this forms a part of our upbringing. It's a combination of your life experiences from the time you're born, the communities that you interact with, your school, your friends, your close circle, which brings about this influence of how society perceives sexuality and that's different across different countries. I had my upbringing in two very unique countries. I was born in India, and while I grew up a major stage of my life in India, I was also in Iran, which is a very secular country, and both of these are like on the extreme ends. It is a combination of how mentalities are in our countries that affect what you think is right, what you think is not right, when you do not have examples to look up to. So in my opinion, your belief and your life experiences shape what you think about sexuality. And which is why when I moved to the US 25 years ago now, it was a driving force for us to change the narrative that we grew up in. And because we felt we were strategically in a place where we are in the West, we know how things are here, how the language and conversation is here versus how it was where we grew up. So being in a place where we could actually make some change, we felt it was our calling to start Besharam, which started with the idea of just being an adult store then. A very crazy idea then, because living in the US, selling to India, cross-border commerce kind of concept was still new, but eventually has evolved into becoming a this word may sound cliche, but a change maker and bringing about more conversations around pleasure and sexuality and driving a sex positive community in India. So that's where I would think, what brings about and then what motivates you kind of comes from your own life experiences and how, your upbringing was.
Yeah. And I think it's so critical that you mention the communication piece, because unless we have language, we can't even begin to ask the questions or push the boundaries or create the change that we want to see in this space. So Mo, in your work, you work with people in a variety of industries. I'm curious, what would you describe as the primary difference? I mean, I think we all do. We're not only dealing with people in sexual wellness and sex tech and femtech all day.
Sure.
How would you describe, when you're talking to people outside the industry versus working with people within it, what do you find the most surprising? What do they find the most surprising? Where are lots of people have challenges just saying the names of body parts and being in the space, and you're in a business that is trying to put that content out there?
Yeah, I mean, we're we're in 2021, and the world of sex, oddly enough, is still considered taboo.
It's crazy.
But it's becoming much more acceptable thanks to mainstream films, major adult brands, social influencers, those who are pushing the envelope. So yeah.
So you've been in the space long enough to have seen some of these changes. I'm curious specifically what kinds of changes you've noticed in the events that you put on. Are there different topics? Are there different kinds of people attending from different backgrounds? Are they looking for different things? As you look over the last several years, what has evolved in what you offer?
Yeah, I mean, this business changes quite often. And obviously you have the world of, adult production to sex toys. So there's just a mix of everything. But as of recent times, obviously, over the past year and a half, going from in-person shows to virtual shows, the major benefit is that everyone can attend from their homes. So those who normally can't afford a ticket to travel, to a different continent, they can now attend a show from their living room. So that's the benefit of doing a virtual show, like this. So
yeah, one of the silver linings of COVID, if we can call it that, is that the conversation about sexuality and self-love and pleasure, as well as the access to it, as you described, has changed dramatically. So you don't have to show up in person if that's not something that's comfortable. You have a way to access the content in whatever form you want.
Exactly.
So Raj, I want to go back to Besharam. So you moved to the West, you had this upbringing in Iran and India, and you are now the #1 sexual wellness brand in India, which is an enormous country, a huge opportunity, but also a big hill to climb. What were some of the key drivers that enabled you to start having these conversations and create this business and actually build a business in this marketplace, given all the challenges and the maybe reluctance to and the discomfort to sexuality in general?
Very true. I'd like to bring everybody's attention to something about India, which may sound ironical, because centuries ago, India came up with Kama Sutra and gave it to the world.
Yeah.
And then now in the 19th, 20th century, the 20th century, we just went behind the curtain and receded and put a lid on the conversation around sexuality. Even though India is still the second largest consumer of porn in the world, and probably also holds the same position for being the most populous country, and probably is going to overtake China maybe before the decade ends. So why it's ironical? Because people are having sex, but maybe they're not talking about it. What's the difference? When they're having sex, they're just procreating. The sexual wellness or sexual health is not a priority. It's just considered a part of life. You get married, you have sex, you make babies, and go on. So what brought us to the place where we thought we could make a change was, of course, our own feeling of retribution from being ridiculed and being shamed about even having conversations. When you're in school, your friends, your colleagues, and these are hush hush topics, and your teachers call you out if you had said something, of course, within the boundaries. But what I think now was bringing about the change is very similar to what's happening in the West. The most impactful change is coming through the chatter on social media. Social media in India and in the Indian subcontinent is probably the most influential driver. And the social media chatter does not just happen between people, between themselves. A lot of new bunch of micro influencers who have come up, who are mostly Gen Z and a few millennials, who have opened and created safe spaces for these conversations around sexual health, demystifying previously assumed sexual, illness, something around menstruation or things that were looked down upon, people wouldn't comfortably talk about in the past. So this, along with the influence of internet, of course, brings about, interaction with the world as one society. It's no longer, hey, the society in this country is different than that country. Now, internet was the barrier. Common culture through movies and TV shows that talk about this, that show. In India, it would have been a big deal to see a couple kissing on screen, probably the time when I left 25, 30 years ago. And one time a popular Bollywood movie showed this. It was a nationwide outrage that how would you show something obscene? But today in India, you would probably see a couple lovemaking to the limits that's allowed without any nudity. And, I've seen parents and their children watch the movie in the same room and not have the sense of discomfort that we had when we grew up, even though our parents were pretty outgoing. So this change has come because of one, the new generation, the culture, the internet. And I think this is going at a very rapid pace because I feel a lot of Indians feel they have been behind several years. So they are actually speeding up to catch up with the times and how these conversations happen worldwide.
So much of the conversation in this space is created by the companies. And the other thing that differentiates this industry is that the companies themselves have taken on the challenge of providing education. Now, I can't speak to the level of sex education in every country around the world, but certainly in the US, it's very hit or miss, if there is any. In the states where it's mandated that sex education is required, it's not necessarily required to be scientifically and medically accurate. So we have people growing up, the people that you mentioned, who have grown up without any formal sex education, however you define that. There are very few parents on the planet who have ever said, yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation with my children. So Mo, I want to understand how you think about that in your role in the industry. How seriously do you take, sort of this vacuum of education in terms of the content that you offer and the discussions you try to create through your events?
I mean, it's really important. The information that we provide to the public, it needs to be on point. We have to represent ourselves just the right way.
And what do you do to ensure that you have accurate information medically, scientifically, gynecologically?
So, I mean, for us, we host a sex expo in New York, and we have sex educators around the clock for 2 days, educating the public attendees who are just dying to learn anything from oral sex to group sex to the full spectrum. So it's really interesting to see how popular these sessions are. I mean, they're jam-packed. They're like, it's standing room only. So there's definitely a need for education because it's not out there.
And I think you make such a good point, for those who say there's not an interest, or investors who say, there's not a market. In my experiences, and it sounds like both of yours, any room you walk into and start talking about this, there are more people who are interested than you know what to do with. There's interest, there's, imagination, there's hope, there's desire on any number of dimensions to learn more and to understand more. So I'm curious, Raj, for you, in your, landscape of inventory of products that you offer, is there part of it where you bring, sex education into it? Do you have a medical advisory board, or is it so consumer facing that it's up to the consumer to, learn what they want to?
A very good question. And I was listening to what Mo was saying and how things are happening in the US as I see around me. With Besharam, thanks to the pandemic, we got serious about sex education. Probably before pandemic, the only place that we can communicate with our fans or outside audience is through social media, because your website is e-commerce website. People come, shop, and go. But our social channels in the past were more about infotainment, and later on the transitions to becoming a platform where most of the questions, because we start getting questions from a lot of people, and we know we don't say that we are experts, and we never presented that, but we saw this was the need, and we realized that you cannot talk to them unless either you're educating them correctly about various topics. It's such a huge range, sexual education, such a huge range. Plus today, because it's a need and there's a gap, we realize that there is this huge gap that exists where we can leverage our brand's position, maybe invest in that rather than have to invest in anything else that does not bring any value or substance. So we consciously transition to bringing more and more such experts who are either sexual health experts, sexuality coaches, and then a variety of doctors who are become micro influencers on social media who talk about various topics. So we collaborated with them because we could not have become the source of information, being we are running a e-commerce brand, so we had to bring in experts. So we kind of gave them a place, brought that kind of information through our networks, through our emails, through our social channels, and we became dispersing. And slowly we realized that a lot of audiences want this. They don't want to come, they don't want to follow your brand just because you're a pretty looking toy brand. They will follow you, or they will want to engage with you if you're giving them some value in the conversation, in the piece of information or post that you have. So this kind of just was like a light bulb moment. Hi, why were you not doing this all this time? You were so we came a little late to that scene, but for the last year, we think we kind of caught up. We have collaborated with about 15 such experts in various different disciplines. We have recently even reaching out to experts outside of our borders. We've talked to, we did a talk show with Cindy, we did a talk show with Jinjin. So we're going to US, UK, Asia, and we realize that the conversations are the same everywhere. And I think through our platform, our followers and everybody who are visiting our site and brand come, and they come there, they will learn of something of value, which hopefully is giving back, initiative from our brand.
Yeah, I think of it not just as giving back, but filling a gap. People either have no information or the wrong information. So Mo, for you've been in this for a while. What would you say are the biggest changes that we have yet to come? What do the next several years look like. We're making progress. People are getting more educated thanks to folks like you. People are having more experience with products. There's more conversation. There are more options. We're having conversations about a broader range of preferences and choices and behaviors. What's next? Is it more of this? Is it going even, from a smaller group to mainstream? What do you see happening in some of these conversations?
Growth will come from innovation, new ways of connecting the average person to the world of sex, whether it's through pleasure products, adult movies, digital content, performers, sexperts, etc.
And do you have a feedback loop with the people who attend your events or in your community to find out what it is they're most interested in? Because there are thousands and thousands of topics and, tens of thousands of products you could exhibit.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously we host our B2B shows, and then we've got our B2C shows, which is pretty different. But everyone's in their own lane. Everyone's doing something different, which is important. Setting yourself apart from the other competitor is where it's at, just like any other industry. So yeah, the more competition, the better.
It's very interesting to a person in this space. Everybody says that, even about a competitor. It's better to have more. There's more conversation, more excitement, more energy, hopefully more funding, more growth. And I ask this question for both of you, how big a part of your businesses are ad sponsorships or sponsors? And are the kinds of companies interested in doing that changing? Have they started to change over the last few years? Raj, do you have an advertising component, and do you have many more options of companies to work with now?
So we are on the other side of the table. We are the ones sponsoring events and influencers and so on and so forth. So our revenue just comes from our e-commerce sales, but we go about sponsoring, and I'm sure Mo will have a different aspect from his side of the table. But we see our participation in such events and initiatives as a way of encouraging and supporting those individuals or organizations that are aligned with our vision, or the efforts they're putting are something that we would have probably wanted to do had we been in their place. So we are consciously supporting that, and especially in India, one of the causes that is very close to us, me and my co-founder both, is how is the state of the LGBTQ community. And since inception, we have always been a very strong voice and a platform to give them that courage and support, which comes through their event sponsorships, as well as many confidential private support to individuals getting jobs, getting placement, getting visa to US to pursue education. So there have been many such events that we have participated as sponsors, and because we believe that we all going to be successful when we work together. And I think this comes in that direction. At Mo.
So we only have a minute or two left. I'd love each of you to comment on what is the most important advice you could give to someone, or something you learned that you really want to share to save someone else potentially some of the pain. I use the expression, save someone else from running into the same brick walls as hard and as often, as I have. So Mo, I'm curious what you would offer someone who's wanting to join this work of bringing sex out of the shadows.
I think it's pretty simple. You got to be all in. Once you come into this industry, you got to be all in.
100%. And to that, I'll add that I think at the moment is the golden period in the history of sex as a business. What 90s was for internet, 2021 is for pleasure products industry, because the hard work and heavy lifting is already being done by our predecessors. Now, the new ones, the newbies, they just have to establish their unique identity and become part of the ecosystem where sex positive communities are built and indulge, where pleasure is just like food and clothes.
I love that, thinking of these big transitions, the industrial revolution, the technology revolution, and now the sex tech revolution.
We are, and our which is why, as we speak, our industry is going mainstream. It's going in parts in every part of the world, not just in the US, not just in India. And there is enough space for a lot of creative, open-minded, new age entrepreneurs to bring about improvements and drive the change of the conversation. So our future generations will have one less thing to worry about.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you so much, Mo and Raj, for sharing your experience and for doing the kind of work that you do and paving the way for different conversations and different businesses going forward.
Thank you.
So
We
much for
like
having
it.
us.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Rachel.
Scherl.
Thank you, Alexis.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Mo, Raj, and Rachel, for again bringing in this topic of sex out of the shadows, because as we can see from this conversation, there are so many different levels that you can pull out in all these different threads. So continue the work, and we'll continue trying to have the discourse. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Enjoy your evening. Take care.
Bye-bye. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.